Transcendental Transformation, the place where spirituality and transformation unite. Host Miss Raina imparts truth so that you can break through your limiting beliefs and evolve into a deeper consciousness. As you go about your day, remember, before every breakthrough, there is a breakdown. And now, let's start the show.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Transcendental Transformation. I'm your host, Miss Raina, and today is Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021. As always, we're coming live from the Sirius Star System studios right here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I hope all is well with everybody. So it is Black History Month, as it is every February 1st, and a little bit about information about that, because you guys know I'm a nerd, and I love history, and I love all sorts of stuff like that. But the 13th Amendment was passed back in January 31st, 1865 by the House of Representatives, and it was a 119 to 56 vote. And one of the greatest things about this is it ended slavery. And if we know about the fight of the Civil War and everything that led to this, well, the first documentation of that was actually the Emancipation Proclamation, which was actually January 1st of 1863. So it took over 2 years for them to pass this bill, and it was really pushed by Abraham Lincoln and his cabinet at the time. And what's funny is the amendment is only in 2 small sections. You think of, when you hear these big House amendments, you think that it's going to have all these paragraphs and everything, but if you actually look it up, it actually has 2 little small sections. The section 2 is actually only 1 line, and I just think that's funny, but I guess that's all you need to know with that. But the fight to end slavery, a lot of people think it started in the Civil War, but it did not. It actually started in the late 1700s when people who were called abolitionists back in Rhode Island started it. And they started an uproar, and a lot of people in the northern states were not for slavery. It was a lot to do with the southern states, and Rhode Island was actually the first state to actually say, you know what? We want to abolish slavery, and that was done in 1776. And then shortly after that, Vermont followed in 77, and Pennsylvania followed in 1780. And and then just from there, the rest is history, and we have what we have today. And I'm so glad to see that things are changing and moving in a direction where we're growing and trying to fight for acceptance and everything, because that's what we really need to do. So, all right, enough about geeky stuff. The last thing I want to mention is the homeless clothes drive that we're doing, which is this Saturday coming up, February 13th. So please, guys, donate. If you guys have any last minute donations or anything that you guys, you can always hit us up on our Spirit Communities page on Facebook and donate money through our GoFundMe link. But if you guys have any clothes, blankets, jackets, anything, bags, tote bags, anything that you can donate, as long as it's usable, please contact us to donate it. We'd really, really appreciate it. All right, as always, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Periscope, and Daily Motion, and we have our replays, as always, the link below. So anyways, guys, I am excited for tonight's show because we have such an amazing guest. I first met this lady through some social media and everything, and I just absolutely love her story. I've had a few conversations with her, and she is a survivor of childhood abuse. And Dr. Rita Louise has emerged as a gifted empath and a talented clairvoyant medical intuitive. She is a naturopathic physician and the founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics that trains students in the art of medical intuition, intuitive counseling, and energy medicine. She has authorized 6 books and produced several featured lengths and full featured lengths and short films. Dr. Louise has appeared on radio shows, televisions, and in movies, and has lectured in health and healing, ghost, intuition, and ancient mysteries and the paranormal. So please help me welcome Dr. Rita Louise.
Hey, Miss Raina, it is so cool to get to hang out with you on air with your listeners and just share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having or for being on the show, because honestly, it's our conversation when we first met was quite a joy, and I love that you have so much, and we're going to get into that later, but you have so much uniqueness that you bring to the table, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So thank you for coming.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So before we get into everything that you do, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are as a person.
So, kind of a weirdo geek myself.
Trick question, right?
So I'm just going to kind of go in the obscure.
Okay.
I really am a very consummate researcher. And so, I like digging into things and studying things, and people laugh at me because, I will read the oldest, driest, most boring book on the shelf if it's a nonfiction type book and enjoy it. And then, and then turn around and report on it. And so what I'm doing now has really been a passion my whole life. People go, oh, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And actually, the two things that I wanted to be when I was a kid was a psychic and an archaeologist. Okay, well, I didn't do the archaeologist thing, but I've written, several books and done several films about ancient mysteries and all those old things. So kind of inadvertently, satisfied that little need. So,
but it's funny because a lot of people, when they grow up, they want to, it's the typical thing. They want to be an athlete, or they want to be a firefighter, or something common, something that people push on them. And you really don't hear, I want to be a psychic, or I want to be an archaeologist. And I think that's great, because already that shows the mindset of where you were going, because we're built to be traditional, aren't we? In our society, we're taught that there's a conformity that we're supposed to be able to, go to school and do certain things, and these are the things that are expected to us. And I think that's absolutely wonderful, that as a child you're like, nah, I don't want to do that stuff. I want to do this and this instead.
Well, it was interesting in 8th grade, and I'll never forget this. In 8th grade, the year project was to do a report on what our career goal was. And so half the people were teachers, or nurses or whatever.
Yes.
Mine was on being an archaeologist, where I decided I didn't want to do that because you had to get a PhD to really do anything. And it's like, hear me, Miss PhD. But, in 8th grade, that was like, I don't think I'm going to do that. And there was one woman who wanted to be an upholsterer.
Yes.
And everything else was just pretty mainstream stuff that people tell you that you're supposed to be.
Yes.
And I'm going to just add, what's interesting is that people will pursue those careers and then find out that they really don't even enjoy it.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes us, that's what shifts our perception actually to, us enjoying our life, because most of the time we spend working, and I love what I do. And to me, I don't feel like I work because I meet awesome people like you, and people that really, but yes, we are taught to be doing certain things in life, and especially taking certain jobs. And even I was pushed. My family had an HVAC company that was very successful in Chicago, and I was groomed towards that. And I was told from a very young age, hey, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to, and this is what you're going to be. And it just didn't sit right with me. And as much as I loved working with my family, I didn't enjoy the work. And I used to wake up and my parents were like, what's wrong with you? We're giving you things, we're making everything easy for, and I'm like, but it's not who I am. And I think that's where we kind of start to stray, because when we're doing something we don't enjoy, our lives become that way as well.
Mm-hmm. And people think it's foolish to follow their passions, but if you really are true to yourself and what you believe, then you can create, and I'm going to say this kind of tactlessly, a career out of it. The people that love mountain climbing create a mountain climbing school or whatever, and they make it work because they allow their passion to drive them versus, the fears and doubts and programming that says, well, you should become an accountant and not a musician, even though you have this deep passion for music.
Yes, and I think that's what's best about it, is what you said was the fears and doubts, is because we're taught fear even such a young age, because right away we're taught you got to get good grades. And I heard this all my life. You better get good grades, or you're not going to get into college and you're not going to be successful in life. And it was all this pressure, and it was hard for me to enjoy school because school, instead of learning, became a chore for me. And I know a lot of people are like that, and I'm one of those people that I don't I just didn't learn like everybody else. You showed it to me, I got it down pat. But if I had to sit there and read something, and I just never comprehended it. It just never translated. But I think that's where we have to start disconnecting. And a lot of people are afraid to leave what they know, don't you think?
Yes, very much so. Or they're too afraid to take the chance and perhaps fail.
Yes. Yes. And failing is just a limited perception in my view. I look at it as yeah. I mean, if we're gonna sit there and say, well, this is success and this is failure, well, the most successful people, I
Fail a
guess,
lot.
yes, exactly. I probably fail more times than they actually
Uh-huh.
succeed.
But they're willing to put the risk out. They're
Yes,
willing to take the risk and do it. You
yes,
know, in what I do in my day job, I do a lot of intuitive counseling with people. And so I have a lot of people that call, because they work for the man, for a number of years. And now they're getting to the place where they want to have a healing career or, do something that fulfills their passion. And it's interesting because there's two kinds of people that I've worked with. There are some people that they have the mindset, there's something innately in them that they're going to be willing to pound pavement and make phone calls or whatever it is that is going to be required of them to follow that passion. And then there are other people, it's like, well, I want to take this class. And I'm like, yeah, but there's all this ancillary stuff that needs to happen.
yes,
And I don't feel this willingness. And so it would really be better for you to just keep your day job and
yes,
do this
yes.
for a sideline kind of fun thing to do.
Well, I think the biggest thing that people have to understand is success doesn't happen overnight in anything. Nothing. I mean, we don't go from first grade to graduating college in 1 year. And I think a lot of people, what ends up happening is we have this idea that, oh, I'm going to follow my bliss, as they all say, and I'm going to
Uh-huh.
follow my passion. I'm going to do all this stuff. And then they spend money and they go out and do it. And then they don't see the results right away. They just expect that all these people are going to be flooded in. And I think that we have to understand that, a lot of times, yes, don't quit your day job, start doing it on the side, because even me, when things have been slow in my life, I've had to get other jobs and stuff. And all of a sudden, this was a hobby of mine for many years. Now it's my career. Now it's my everything. But I didn't have that idea that it's just going to flourish overnight. Hey, great if it does for you. But 9 out of 10 people, it's going to take many years, 10, 15 years sometimes to build.
Hmm. And then there's doing it because you're making money, but sometimes, the job that you have is not really fulfilling, but you can sit there and fulfill your passion on the weekends. You can go and do those things that bring joy to your life, that put money in your personal bank and gives you satisfaction so that you can go to work every day and have that be, like that's where I go to make money, but I'm not looking to that to fulfill me. I'm looking over here for that satisfaction. And I think that's really the bottom line is, what are you doing to fulfill yourself, to satisfy yourself, to fill your soul and find that bliss?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think that's the basis for everybody. Everybody, the fundamental of people is they want to be loved, they want to be accepted, and they want to feel healthy about themselves or good about them. I don't like using the words good or bad, but they want to feel good about themselves. They want to feel appreciated. And I think that's the fundamental basis to mostly every human being in the world. And
Hmm.
I think sadly, we developed this idea where because of society's standards, towards that we're not good enough, and if we don't have a certain talent, if we don't have money, if we don't have if we're not aesthetically pleasing, I mean, all these things all of a sudden start to develop a without within us, and we're trying to fulfill ourselves by those actions, and that's when it doesn't become true. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they're chasing themselves rather than actually wanting to do what they wanted to do. And I think the people that do what they want to do because they're not chasing that fulfillment, because they are fulfilled, that's when that shift happens, and that's when their career actually starts to be who they need it to be.
Mm-hmm. You know, and you brought up a very interesting point that I want to kind of come back to, is that there are a lot of people that are waiting for something. You know,
Yes.
if I lose 25 pounds,
Yes.
if I do this, if I do that, then I can XXX.
Yes.
If, for the listeners, you know, if this is you, if this is you, maybe it's time to stop waiting. You know,
Yes.
if you're looking to create a relationship, then maybe it's time to start putting yourself out there, even if you haven't lost the 10 or 15 pounds that you're looking to lose, you know,
Yes.
or whatever that is. You know, I like to use an analogy. It's kind of like, if you haven't done something, or if you haven't done something in a really long time, it's like we have these gears that become rusty and
Yes.
squeaky, and you kind of have to get the gears going and moving. And so by taking that risk and moving forward, it gives you the opportunity to get those gears loosened up, because you never know, you might start down this road that you're interested in, and the things that you've been waiting for now will come in, because you're not inhibiting the ability of it to move through you from an energetic perspective.
Absolutely. And I think you said it actually perfectly, because taking things slow is something that we have to learn to develop, because we're not a patient society. We're not, especially here in the United States. We want it now. We want it fast. We don't want to. I mean, when someone has to wait 5 minutes, I see people, I don't eat fast food or anything, but even some of my healthier stuff that's faster, I see people, if they have to wait longer than 5-10 minutes, they start, where's my food? What's going on? I'm waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like slow. It's like, take a breath, slow down. It's it's not the end of the world if and it is. I mean, I took a break from doing my work for a few years, because I just felt that at the time I had stuff I had to deal with. There was things I needed to go through, and so I took a break. And so when I came back, and I reached out to my people again, and I said, hey, I'm going to start this up again. Are you still in? And they said yes, blah blah. It was one of those things where they were like, all right, well, let's start doing this. I said, whoa, slow down a minute. Slow down a minute. You know what? I haven't done it in 2 years. Not everything's sharp. My voice isn't sharp. My mind, I got to take a moment to get back to it. And I think that's a really great message that you put in. But you know what, Rita, we're going to take a break in a second, and we're going to be right back after these messages.
The human experience is changing, and consciousness is evolving into something higher than any of us could ever imagine. As we transform into more sentient beings, a new world of connected consciousness is taking place. Welcome to I Am Evolution, the movement in human development that transforms the human experience into a deeper consciousness through perspective and duality. Are you ready to be a part of the next stage in human evolution? Call I Am Evolution today to schedule your appointment at 561-318-0006. That's 561-318-0006. Or email us at iamevolution@protonmail.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. And if you're just joining us, we just got done with the first half of the show, and we are talking to the amazing Dr. Rita Louise. Dr. Louise, you have such amazing insight so far, but one of the things that interest me about you, you created a foundation or an institute called the Institute of Applied Energetics that it trains students in the art of medical intuition, intuitive counseling, and energy. What prompted you to start that?
So it's a bit of a weird, convoluted story. So, I mean, I've been working as a medical intuitive
Yes.
counselor, and energy practitioner myself, and had written one book kind of on that topic long before, actually, before the term medical intuition was actually a word. Um, and so there was a very Actually, I'm going to back up. So I was taking this sales, it was a marketing class, although it was really all about sales, from a friend of mine. And our homework was we were supposed to call up our clients and kind of check in with them. Well, most of my clients are health people, and so it's like, hey, are you feeling sick? I mean, so I picked some really like easy people to call. So 3 phone calls, 3 hours worth of my time, because it was not a 5 minute phone call, never a 5 minute phone call. And what was interesting, so there was this very well known medical intuitive that was coming into Dallas, and I lived in Dallas at the time. And in each phone call, they asked me if I was going to go see this woman's presentation. Well, by the third phone call, I'm like, okay, I guess I need to go to this presentation. And I was less than impressed, like really unimpressed. And I'm thinking, people are studying with this woman,
Yes.
then what are they learning? And it just wasn't congruent for me. And so then it was kind of like, well, you should just take everything that you know and create the school. So I did.
Well, that's simple enough. Hey, you know what? I'm gonna start this, so I did. But it doesn't take. I think that's something that a lot of people have to understand, is because it's okay to start something, but you have to have the backings to it, because a lot of people, and I see it down here in Florida, and of course I will never badmouth anybody, because that's not what I'm about, but a lot of us just say, you know what, I want to help people, so I'm going to be a life coach, or I'm going to start doing this, and they start but they don't understand, because they don't have the knowledge or education behind them to understand the whole psychological, mental, and emotional aspects. I mean, there is so much to doing it, and you're obviously very well educated and have a background that's a mile long, and so for you recognize that hey, why this lady's, or this person, I don't remember, this person's teaching it, and obviously this person is going in a direction that isn't with mine. And I think that's great inspiration, because a lot of times we see those people, and they're trying their hardest, they're doing the thing that they need to do, but I think it's great that you were able to say that and say, you know what, I think I can do this too, and make something of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. um, and I think the biggest thing is, to work as a medical intuitive, you have to be intuitive,
Yes.
and you have to kind of stretch that skill. And one of the things about intuition is that it's a felt sense, it's what you get inside. And so, when I was younger and wanted to become a psychic, see, this is how I got really smart, is I thought, I thought that all you needed to do was like read all of these books,
Yes.
so like an autobiography of a yogi, he did all of this stuff and he became enlightened. And the byproduct of enlightenment was that you got psychic abilities. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to become enlightened. And so I just started reading all of this stuff, and it was the 80s. So it was all about, personal growth and
Yes.
self-help. And I just kept waiting to become enlightened and have psychic abilities, except that never happened.
Yes.
And then I went to the Berkeley Psychic Institute and studied with them. But after being in their program for 3 weeks, I realized that I had been very psychic my whole life, and no one ever connected the dots for me.
Yes.
And their training really helped you put a process together so that this was their claim. They didn't teach you to be psychic. They taught you to recognize when you were getting the information.
Oh, okay. That's just useful. Absolutely.
And so it really is, because people are like, oh, well, I need to open up my chakras. Yeah. And it's like, no, they're probably already open.
Yes.
And my really lame example is, when you get that message, first thing in the morning, I should take a sweater to work, or I should put a sweater on. And you're like, it's a gorgeous day. It's like 500 degrees outside. I don't need a sweater. And then you go to work and you end up in a meeting and they have the temperature down at 65 degrees and now you're freezing. There's that little piece in your mind that goes, God, I wish I brought that sweater.
Yes. Yes.
And so the intuitive part is you got the message. You maybe didn't listen to the message,
Yeah.
but you got the message. And the training tells you, listen to the message.
Yes, and, you know, that brings me to a funny story, because one time we had a hurricane down here back in like '05 or whatever, and it wasn't a bad one, but I used to have a sunroof on my car, and even and I my senses were always open even from a young age, but even the best of us, we don't listen sometimes. And I remember one time I was laying down and they showed me in my head the picture of the sunroof being open, and I was like, yeah, but is it really open? Or I thought I shut it, and and finally I got tired and I fell asleep. In the morning after the hurricane was gone, my car was soaked because I didn't listen. They showed it to me. They showed me the information, and I think I just kind of ignored it just because I was tired. And the whole interior of the car was wet. None of my gadgets worked because everything was automated and everything was soaked. And it was a great lesson, because I was like, yes, every time this happens, you have to listen to it because they're trying to help you out. But I think that's something that we do is a lot of people will sit there and say, oh, well, the information is out there. I have to get it in order to attain being a psychic, intuitive, a healer, or whatever it is. The information's outside of us. But no, the information's inside of us. I always tell my students the same, is that don't pick up a book, don't go, and that start trusting who you are and the information that you get, because the moment you start to connect, you're going to get this information that maybe some of the yogis or the Buddhists or whoever, or the avatars of the world have passed on. And yes, knowledge in books is great to have, but at the same time, your own intuition will tell you everything you need to know.
Mm-hmm. And like the training, since that's what we were talking about, I would say there's about 30% brain food, so it's in 4 modules. And so each module usually has like 3 books you have to read as kind of this is where we're going. And this is kind of the scientific basis of what we're doing. And then everything else is hands-on, so you have that experience, and so you can feel someone's aura or get that validation that what you were thinking was actually true, and go forward. Can I just share a quick story kind of similar to yours?
Yeah, absolutely.
So all right, shh, don't tell anybody, but we're having a little Super Bowl party, and so because of COVID, there's a lot of people we know that won't come.
Yes.
Because of that. And so, I'm asking, well, who should I invite? And so this one friend that's not really even a close friend, it's more of an acquaintance that lives near me, keeps coming in my mind. So finally, I messaged him and I'm like, well, I don't really know what this is about, but we're having this party and you keep coming in my head. So I'm inviting you.
Oh, nice.
And, and he and his wife already had plans, and apparently this is a long-term thing that they do. I said, well, I don't really know what this is about.
Yeah.
So if anything happens, just let me know, because it's just weird, how that works.
Yes. Yeah. And people have, I think that everyone has those experiences, but we don't pay attention to them, and whether it works out or it doesn't work out in whatever perception you have, I think that connecting to that over and over, because yes, it's those experiences. They'll say, well, I had this thing, but I had this feeling, I had this thought, I had this intuition, but it didn't pan out the way it was, so I don't get it, and they dismiss it right away. But it's not about that, because it's learning to develop to make that connection, because there's something about, maybe I know I've reached out to people the same way and said, well, I don't know, and I said, okay, I'll reach out to this person, and nothing happened. 6 months later, all of a sudden I ran into the person and the friendship blossomed, or business thing, and so those connections are for a reason. But if we dismiss them right away, then we're dismissing the information and then the experience that we're having at that moment. And I think that's where we start to change and rely on an external validation, an external world, rather than an internal one.
Exactly. All right, I got another story. You seem like you like stories. And this one is kind of over the top. And so I have to kind of put this in context. So this was long before I was psychic. But I was, reading all of my books, and so I was like 20 or 21, and I have to share that because the way that I tell the story is really through the eyes of a 20-year-old. Okay. And so I was working at this company as a drafter, and in the room next to me was a lab, and there was this guy who was about my age, and we hung around and did bad things. We did a lot of bad things, and his boss. And so I didn't really interact with the boss. I would say hi. We would go and get sodas in the afternoon, and I'd ask him if he wanted a soda, and that was pretty much our relationship. And so he didn't come into work one day. And so the next day I went in to do my normal, hey, how's it going? And so here's the really 20-year-old part. And so he had this like major comb over thing happening. And on the top of his head, he had one of those little round Band-Aids. And so in my brain, because it's weird if you haven't figured that out yet. So in my brain, I thought, well, he must have his zit up there and it's kind of pussy. And he put the Band-Aid on there because, it's his zit and it's pussy and he only has a comb over going on. So that's what I was thinking. And I walked over to him. No lie. I crossed my arms and went, well, where were you yesterday having them check for a brain tumor?
Oh,
And
whoa.
his face turned white and he
Wow.
walked out of the room. Now, every hair on my body was standing on end and I started shaking.
Yeah.
I went back to my desk and I'm like, that was really weird. Okay,
Yeah.
that was what my brain said. That was really weird.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then my friend came in and was screaming at me because the boss thought he had told me where he went, which he didn't. So
Wow.
I guess the point of the story is that when you have these weird coincidences happen and stuff that you're not supposed to know, psychic,
Yes.
psychic.
There's your sign, right? As the old
It's your
saying goes,
sign,
there's your
yeah.
sign. And that's funny because I think as a child I went through a lot of the same experiences where and I think that's what's the hard part is about that is because learning to be intuitive and be because there's a term nowadays that downgrades a lot of what we go through and it's called woo woo, and a lot of people, and I hear that in business, oh, you're not woo woo, are you? As soon as I say hi, this is what I do, that's the first thing that they come out, and it's like, what do you mean woo woo? Well, you're not going to be out there parading around, and it's like it's not about that. It's about, but as a child, it was hard for me because I would say things, and I think a lot of people who have gone through similar experiences than you and I, we would say things and not know why, and it would sometimes freak us out, freak people out, and then you become the weird kid, and people are just like, oh, that's the weird, and still to this day, I own that title now. People like, oh, there's Miss Raina, she's the weird one. Hey, great, perfect, But I think that's where we have to develop, and I mean, did you go through? I mean, I know you said that you did it mostly when you were older, but did you recognize? Were you able when you were older? Were you able to recognize that you had a lot of intuition when you were younger?
Again, it wasn't until I
Yeah.
had that experience. So when I was at the Berkeley Psychic Institute, they had these healing clinics where a group of readers
Yes.
would do a reading on one person
Okay.
and then do energy work around the issue. And again, I was only in the program about 3 weeks. This was a year-long program. And for some reason, that evening, a bunch of people that had completed that section of the program, because it was just a 3-month window, decided to come back. So instead of it being the 5 of us, which was in the group, there were now 10. And the way that it was organized is that I'm going to say the most senior person, the most open person sat in the center. And then everybody filtered down. And since I was so new, I was like way at the end of the row. That's where I sat. And so this woman came in and she's talking about her beauty salon and about how she's losing customers and this and this and this. And it was interesting because all the really smart older people were like, oh, well, she has these past life contracts about this and these present life contracts and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, who cares? It's not getting butts and shares.
Yes.
And the whole time she was talking, I just kept seeing this woman walk up to like a workstation or a desk and slam her purse down and slam a purse down. It was like this little recording going off in my mind's eye. And so, they finished, and the woman who was facilitating it said, "Well, is there anybody that wants to say anything?" And so I raised my hand, which apparently you weren't supposed to do, but I did. And and she goes, "Well, Rita, what do you want to share?" And so I started talking, and she goes, "Well, when we do readings, you do them with your eyes closed." So I don't know if you've ever tried to talk with your eyes closed. It really is a learned skill.
Yes. Yes.
And so I closed my eyes, and I just said to the woman, it's like, uh, "Did you have a woman with long red hair working for you?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, when she left, was she really angry?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, her anger energy is, you know, interfering with the ability of the shop to run." And I just, in my mind, in that moment, went,
Yeah.
"Coincidence." And I totally didn't own it. And then I opened my eyes. I'm all the way on this one end of all the 10 people, and the entire row of people were leaned over in their chairs looking at me because apparently I had hit, and
Hit
hit
it on the
hard.
head. Yes.
And it was that moment that the brain, the brain tumor thing went bing, 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 psychic,
Yes.
psychic, psychic. And it took a whole lifetime of saying things to people and
Yes.
all of this weird stuff to come into focus. Like, oh, yeah. Like, I guess, like knowing what's in your Christmas gifts is a psychic thing.
That was always a downer for me. I don't celebrate Christmas anymore, but yeah, that was, when I was a child, even people would go into the movies, like people would be like, "All right, Miss Raina, don't say anything," because it's like I'd be like, "Oh, did it?" And I'd say, and they'd be like, "Oh, you ruined the movie," and it's funny because those are the, but at the same time, those are the moments that are special because those are the moments where you're truly learning about who you are, what we're capable of, and it's a great development. And I always tell people, even as cheesy as it sounds and cliche it does, grab a book or something, start writing down those little moments, because when you
Mm-hmm.
start to see how many of those little moments you have, you start to realize the energy behind them, because there's always a difference between a random thought that pops up in your conscious mind and an intuitive thought. At least that's how I experience it. When it's intuitive, there's a special energy that comes by.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was younger, those special moments like the one that you were having, I had to learn to develop that connection. Ooh, that's how I felt when this was going on. Ooh, that's how I
Exactly.
felt. And once that connection starts to do it, it's like riding a bike. But Rita, I'm having such a great time. But we're gonna take a break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
The human experience is changing, and consciousness is evolving into something higher than any of us could ever imagine. As we transform into more sentient beings, a new world of connected consciousness is taking place. Welcome to I Am Evolution, the movement in human development that transforms the human experience into a deeper consciousness through perspective and duality. Are you ready to be a part of the next stage in human evolution? Call I Am Evolution today to schedule your appointment at 561-318-0006. That's 561-318-0006. Or email us at iamevolution@protonmail.com.
All right, everybody, we're back. And if you're just joining us, we are in the last section. And Dr. Rita, I have to say, I am having an amazing time. And I know we're in the last section of the show, so I really want to talk about this. But you wrote a book, I believe, last year that was on healing dysfunctional relationships, and especially with Valentine's Day coming around the corner and everything. I think it's important for us to understand this stuff. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the name of the book is The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist. And what it really talks about is how early childhood trauma sets us up for recreating the dysfunction that we experienced in our family dynamics, in our adult relationships, and especially, where it becomes the most hurtful in our romantic relationships.
Yes. Yes, you know, I came from abuse, and I know a
All the
lot.
weird people do.
Yes, we do, right? We do. I think that's what gives us that little bit of edge. But I think that's so spot on about your book, is because you know, it's we tend to take on, some of us, you can go two ways. Some of us take that way of our abuse and we become very angry, we become very hurtful, and we repeat those patterns in relationships, and a lot of us don't understand what's going on. And so if we're empathic like you and I, and all of a sudden plus we're having unresolved trauma from our past, we're doubling down, because now we're feeling energy from somebody else and we're not understanding how to receive it, and then we're having that anger and resentment, and it's just a mixture for disaster.
It is. And I'm going to share something with you. I did some research on this, not that it was on the internet, but just, like some soul searching and then some questionnaires uh, to groups that self-identified themselves as being empathic. And clearly over 85% of the people that responded to my questionnaires, it had some form of childhood abuse,
Yes.
like fairly severe. But if you think about it, when you're talking about being an empath, you're able to feel and sense and detect the energy of the people around you or the environment or whatever that is. And my belief is that, we can come into the world as a sensitive individual and we can develop that sensitivity. Well, if you are in a dysfunctional household and you come in sensitive, and now you're spending like a lot of your time growing up feeling into your parents. Like,
Yes.
is it okay to play? Do I need to go hide in my room? What do I need to do? It's like you've had 18 years of like hardcore
Yes.
psychic stuff that
Yes. Yes, and you're feeling all the anger, all your parent or whoever, even if it's not directly your family, maybe it's the next door neighbors. Because I even had a situation with a neighbor where it was a constant bully situation from 5th grade all the way to my senior year of high school. It was constant fights and everything, and it just never let up. And that energy and that anxiety, because you're already feeling it, and then your mind starts to, because your mind loves to play out scenarios. It starts to calculate, well, today's another day and this will probably happen, and so it's starting to create this whole cauldron, let's just say, of a stew of just all these emotions. And that's got to be so hard for a lot of people. It could lead people into depression and anxiety, PTSD.
oh, exactly. I mean, for me, the term I like to use is I was a raging trans medium, and so there was so much tension and anger going on in our family dynamic. And I would just take it all in. And then, yay, I would get to express it for the whole family. So they thought I had major anger issues and, I had all these issues. And then I moved out of my parents' house when I was 17, and I came to discover that like I don't really have anger issues, and I'm really not an angry person, and I don't yell at people, and I don't like blow a fuse and do these things. But if you understand the concept of being an empath, it's like I just took in all of their stuff. And after a while, I couldn't contain it anymore. And I had to discharge. And that's how it would discharge.
Yes.
It would be through loud eruptions.
Yes. Like a volcano, right?
A little bit.
But the energy, people don't understand that the energy has to go someplace. It's even if we understand, like, let's say without me getting all geeky, in Chinese medicine, every part of the body, the organ, has a function to do, and energy is either going up, down, sideways, backwards, and so when that energy gets halted, because I always tell people emotions aren't real, but our experiences are, and to understand that concept, we have to understand that emotions are us understanding data that's coming in, and how we translate that data is depending on our perception in life. And so if we translate data as something that's hard and hurtful, we're going to hold on to that energy, and then all of a sudden we call that like anger or resentment because it's tight and it hurts, and then that energy eventually because energy has to move. That's what its function is. It moves. And so in order for that function to do, it goes someplace, and usually that's when we blow our tops, and I'm guilty of that. I throughout my life I was and still to this day, one of my biggest challenges is, I do very well a lot of times, but just sometimes I'll get that, and then it just and it just explodes. And I think we have to realize that, especially if you have trauma in your life as a child and you're empathic, you have to give yourself a little bit of a break and start to work with what you're understanding at that time.
And one of the big points of the book, which I think is really important for people to hear, is, it's talking. Okay, so my belief in writing the book, that if you're a narcissist, you would never read this book, period. Because you're a narcissist and you're perfect. And
yes, it's not your fault. It's everyone else's fault. Yes.
But this book really was written for people who find themselves getting into repeated toxic relationships, or are in a toxic relationship. I mean, I know people that will stay married 25, 30 years, and it's just abuse for 25, 30 years. And so this book is written for those people. And, I was in a chat room, and I said, well, maybe you need to look at, what you're bringing to the table. And the hate comments came on that one.
Yes.
But the reality is that you're there for a reason. You stayed there for a reason. You're not sticking up for yourself for a reason. So what's the reason? And it's about taking personal responsibility for who I am and what I'm bringing to the table.
Yes.
And people who were brought up in dysfunctional families many times don't know what right looks like. They don't know what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yes.
They don't know that, okay, well, he's not hitting me, so it's not abusive.
Yes.
And so it's really kind of talking about, well, what's your experience and what is right? What does right look like? So that you can go and enter into another relationship from a more healthy place, because you've healed inside, you've healed yourself, and aren't expecting the other person to make you whole.
And that is the reason why we're chasing those toxic relationships. We're trying to have someone else make us whole. And how many times do we hear, well, once I get married, everything's going to be okay. Or once I find Mr. or Mrs. Right, everything's going to be okay. Like it's a magical solution to all our problems, because I mean, hey, we grew up with Disney, right? And I love Disney, and I don't want Disney coming after me for this, but we always see, like, especially in the old time Disneys, that the girl is always in trouble, and then a guy, Prince Charming, comes in and rescues her and lives happily ever after. And I think slowly we condition to that idea that someone is supposed to save us, whether it's a man or a woman. Someone's going to come in and fix me. And so we repeat our toxic relationships, and then we point the finger, because I truly believe all of us have a little bit of narcissism in us to some extent. I mean, that's just the way the brain works. Our ego loves to get in there and just, and it's hard, but I think that's the most important message, and one of the best messages that you offer is taking responsibility. Because yes, just because he or she isn't hitting us, that doesn't mean that it's not a toxic relationship. There's verbal abuse, there's mental abuse, there's all different. There's even disconnection, where people you're with somebody and they are just so disconnected from you in a form that's a form of abuse as well. And I think that we have to stop doing this and start doing this more often, and saying, you know what, there's nothing wrong with why I'm doing this. I just have to figure out the reason why I keep repeating these same patterns.
And I think there's also there's two pieces. There's having the willingness and the ability to communicate with your partner. It's like, well, this happened and it upset me, or I feel disconnected from you,
Yes.
and the willingness on the partner to make it work. Where the
Yes.
relationship becomes toxic is, um, well, this is what I need from you, and that you might get lip service. I mean, that's how come those people stay for 25 years. It's like, oh no, I'm so sorry. It's all going to be
Yes.
better.
Yes.
And then 2 weeks later, they're back to their old pattern. And it's
Yes.
like, when do we say enough is enough? You
Well,
know,
I think it's an addiction. I think that anything that's a habit is an addiction, whether it be food, drugs, alcohol, toxic relationships. I think that's what we're feeding, because there's that victim inside of us, and that victim wants that attention. It wants us to say our piece and have that be recognized and have everyone do. And as long as that gets fed, it's kind of like when we're upset, we have comfort food, right? It's not fixing
hmm
the issue, but we're comforted. And so when you get that, oh, okay, baby, I'm sorry, I'll try again, and then they just keep repeating the pattern. It's that that addiction and that addictive side to us that says, well, I'm not really wanting that. All I want is just some personal attention. And that's and I hate to use the word right and wrong, because I don't believe in those, but that's the wrong type of attention that we're receiving from our partner, because we should want someone, as you said, someone that's willing to want us and be with us and communicate with us and listen to us when we're having an issue, not just being like, oh, he or she's just nagging at me again.
hmm Well, and you bring up a really important point that I go into in a bit of, not a ton of detail, but enough detail. And it's something that's called trauma bonding. And so if you're in a toxic relationship, so they're really mean to you, or whatever that dynamic is, if you're the recipient, and especially if you're an empath, because now you're feeling their emotional energy and it's ripping you up inside.
Yes.
Well, it causes the body to release a bunch of cortisol and stress
Yes.
hormones. And now you're, totally stressed out inside.
Yes.
But then they come and they go, oh, it's all going to be better. And it creates an automatic dopamine release and
Yes.
serotonin release in the
Yes.
body. And so your hormones, instead of being normally regulated, are going, "Wah." And
Yeah, like a roller
so
coaster.
no, seriously.
I know.
And it does become an addiction for
It is.
people that are really in toxic relationship. It does become an addiction. You are looking. I'm going to tell my story. So I've been in multiple not very good relationships, and the last really toxic one I was in, I could not tell if there was he had a mental health issue or if he was just a drunk, because he hid his booze really good. Um, but I think it was a combination of the two. And he would be awful for like 4 or 5 days, and then he would like turn around and be this really great guy, like the guy that I fell in love with. And then Monday would come and he would be back to being this jerk. But you know, it dysregulates your hormones.
Yes.
And so it makes it so that you do want that fix. You do want that connection so that you can experience the serotonin again.
And and that's something we have to understand, because, as you said, we have a society of where everything needs to be big and bigger and more explosive and cooler definitions, and the iPhones have to be sharp, and so our dopamine is constantly being used up, and then of course we're turning to things like 5-HTP for serotonin, and it's just like we're filling ourselves with and I think that's the hardest part, is because, yes, when we're going from one extreme to another instead of just an even thing, because, hey, our body's regulated, it goes up and down constantly, but when we're on that jagged roller coaster of a drop constantly, as you said, that's going to leave us with not only an emotional scar, it's going to leave us mentally unfit, because it starts to change our mindset. Because what does the mind do? It starts to say, well, what am I doing wrong? I'm not good enough, I need to change, I need to do this. And it's not understanding that, no, it's not just that, it's a combination of your partner and you and the mindset and everything and what we're chasing. So
hmm Exactly. Sounds like you might have a little bit of experience in that.
Just a tad, just a tad. But Rita, we're coming close to the end of the show right now, and I gotta say, I just had a fabulous time with you, and honestly, I hope to have you back in the future.
I was going to make an email comment, but I would love to. I would.
Perfect. So before we go, do you have any, do you want to give out your information, and do you have any special offers that you want to give to the listeners?
I don't have any special offers, but people can find me on my primary website, which is soulhealer.com, SOULHEALER.com, soulhealer.com. It is everything Dr. Rita. It will take you to my other sites, which are medical-intuitive.com, or the training site, appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, but you can get everywhere through there. There's a ton of articles and videos and old interviews that are all free to access. And actually, I am in the process of doing a trauma series. And so I just released the second article of like a 12-piece series on healing trauma. And so if people are interested in that, they can go to the website and sign up for the newsletter, because it's coming out every other week. Like we just did the Wounded Hero. We just talked about the effects of trauma. And so it's going through a bunch of things, and then what you can do to regain peace and an emotional regulation in your life. And so I would love to offer that to everyone. My book, The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist, is available there. All of my books are there. They're also available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, all the regular retailers.
Perfect. And I honestly think that anybody would benefit from your knowledge and your experiences. So, Dr. Rita, thank you so much for being on the show as well.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. If you want to follow us on our social media, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Transcendental Transformation. Our YouTube is Transcendental Transformation Radio Show. Make sure you visit my website, soulandspiritguide.com, and sign up for the newsletter to receive hidden shows and VIP access and special guest offers. And if you have any questions about tonight's show, email me at transcendentaltransformations@gmail.com. And always remember to believe in yourself, and it's not our abilities or our talents that make us who we are, but it is our choices. Thank you, and have a wonderful night.